I'm building a permanent air conditioning system that uses almost no electricity for $250. Right here in the unrelenting heat of the Chihuahuan Desert, or today, the wind, I'm taking the lessons from 2 years ago when I attempted this project for a different building. Armed with a mix of grit and newfound knowledge, I'm set to beat the heat on a budget that would make any DIYer take a second look. My name's Sean Overton. I'm turning this into a desert forest, but in order to do that, I need to support the humans before I can worry about the plants. This journey isn't just about cooling off. It's about changing a past failure like this into a stepping stone for success. With $250 and a collection of materials, some of them are brand new, some are scavenged, I was able to craft not just an air conditioning system, but a model that works in an extreme environment. Each component, whether it's a $20 fan or a $25 tube of HDPE, has been chosen for its cost effectiveness and, of course, for the fact that they work. With the right approach, I'm proving that even a harsh environment like this can be made friendly. Or at least tolerable. One of the biggest challenges was figuring out how to dig this safely, because OSHA standards are you can have a maximum trench depth of 5 feet before it requires shoring. And we are just about at 5 feet. That is giving me the best of both worlds, where the deeper you go, up to about 8 feet, the better thermal performance you're going to get. So we're sacrificing probably a couple of degrees of cooling because we weren't able to get to the desired depth. But I'm working with the tools I got. I have a $2,000 Chinese mini excavator, a $45 shipping crate, and a ladder that we're making this with. So you use the tools that you got, and I feel like this is a good example of adapting, but we still have yet to prove the solution. We did have a communication mishap where I originally intended for Brandon to park the mini excavator right there and dig all the way down as far as it would go before he moved, and that would have prevented 95% of this problem of all this space. But he wanted to make sure that he got the right diameter on the circle to get the 25-foot run, and unfortunately kind of painted himself into a corner. He had to use the rotary hammer drill with a chisel to get the material broken up and then alternate between hand digging and the mini excavator. Is definitely not ideal, and if I had to do this again, I'm trenching in a straight line, even if it means extra digging. The practical logistics of a mini excavator driving backwards and trenching as it goes, it's way safer, and you don't have to worry about the length. You can just already tell how far the trench is, so don't dig circles with equipment. But now, that's enough flapping my gums. Let me show you the actual work, and let's prove that this is a good idea.
This hole's about 5 feet deep now. A little more on this side, a little less by the building. I think the mini here has gotten to about as deep as it will dig safely, at least with my know-how. It's undercutting near the bottom of the hole. We can manually get a little bit deeper and not have to remove as much material to get the conduit down there. So I'm just getting in with a bucket and a trowel. We'll see if we can't finish up that way.
This is Diggy Smalls, and this is one of my biggest wins from the last year. This is when the cheap Chinese excavators were completely flooding the market, and I saw 130 excavators go on sale at Ritchie Brothers, and I picked this thing up for $2,076 out the door, all fees included. I had no trouble bringing it out to the ranch on the back of my dually, and we've now used it for many, many projects. I think I'm on 6 months of owning it, maybe less. Easily cheaper than what it would have cost to rent a mini excavator from El Paso, let alone all of the headache and logistics of driving rentals back and forth. This is such a better option. Yes, it's small, yes, it's underpowered, but it's making progress. It is doing work. So over time, looking for deals and finding opportunities and understanding how to run this equipment, now I feel like I have the fleet of tools required to be able to do this type of off-grid experience. It's not enough to own the equipment if you don't know how to operate it, and that comes with time and experience. The first go-round when I was renting equipment, we just rented a concrete breaker as well. And this was a couple of years ago before our horrible inflation kicked off. I spent $2,000 for the week for a concrete breaker and a skid steer. That is not budget friendly at all. I mean, $2,000 buy something like this, and I own it. And the reason we knew the concrete breaker was necessary is I had an 11,000-pound skid steer, and we had a hard time getting through the material. So even though this stuff isn't bound with cement, the calcium in the soil when it's dry, it functions like a cement. I mean, you could dig through this if you really had to, but it would be horrible. You basically have to wait for it to rain before you have any hope of digging anything without equipment. And by the way, I didn't forget about that naming contest, so thank you to everybody that participated, because I never would have come up with something as clever as Diggy Smalls. That is 100% crowdsourced, so thank you to everybody that submitted a suggestion. And because that mini excavator is admittedly underpowered, I need a backup plan. So if the mini can't get through the material, the smart thing to do would be to wait for rain, but it's been 2 years since we've had a rain. So in order to run things on my schedule, why is the drill not here? Just kidding. I forgot it's in a black case and not a blue case. Ta-da. You saw me use that before on the cave episode. I know for a fact that even when the material is cemented, you can use a rotary hammer drill to, especially with a chisel bit, to get through the cemented material. The alternative, which I didn't do in time, is to buy a ripper tooth for the mini excavator. It's almost the same price. That hammer drill is about $160, $170, and a ripper tooth is almost the same cost for a small excavator. But again, I already own the drill. If I was buying something just for this project, I'd buy the ripper tooth. I tried this geothermal approach before because I was going to build a sandbag cabin. And as you can probably tell, it didn't get built. And the approach was logical. If you're going to build a building and you got to dig anyway, you may as well dig the tubes before you start the foundation. But once I actually started that, I realized the process of stacking these bags and getting them organized and flat, and then you're racing against the clock because these sandbags, they only last 6 months in the sun. And even though I keep constantly trying to keep them covered, I basically gave up on these bags. They're going to degrade, and there's no way I can use them for building material. These bags are useless. It was a great idea in theory, but the practice of it is just completely different. I loved the idea of using a native material that's here on the site, but time is money, and especially since I'm only here for a week every month, it's really hard to justify me stacking sandbags in the middle of the desert when there are more efficient solutions that are really cost effective. Right now, Brandon, my ranch hand, lives full-time in one of those dog houses you see behind me. And when I'm out here for a week every month, that building in the front left is mine. These dog houses have been fantastic because, including the delivery cost, it works out $35 a square foot. For an instant solution, I'm not gonna do better, especially one that's insulated and has a roof on it and is ready to walk in and live in, with a little modest rehab. It's pretty much the opposite of a sandbag cabin, which is what I thought I was going to build when I first moved out here. The problem with these dog houses is that the sun literally bakes them. A small 400-watt air conditioner effectively cools this building, but the problem is I have 5 buildings. Powering that takes a lot of equipment. It's not just batteries, it's inverters and charge controllers and panels and all those things. But if you like sleeping in temperatures less than 85 degrees inside, you're gonna need a lot of power after the sun goes down. And that means a lot of batteries. If you have any experience with solar systems, you know that the expense isn't the panels, it's all of the supporting equipment. It's fuse boxes, fuses, inverter, bus bars, charge controllers, all the things that are required to keep this stuff operating. It adds up. And the charge controllers are pricey, and I think even if you don't have off-grid experience, you know, the cost is all in the batteries. The more juice you need, the more batteries you need, and when they're $180 a pop, it adds up pretty quick. So the best way to save money on electricity is to design your life to use the minimum amount of electricity. I know I'm not blowing any minds with it, pretty obvious. Without the air conditioner running, which was most of the time because I didn't have enough off-grid electrical storage, it would be more than 90 degrees in the cabin. And I don't know if you've ever tried to sleep in those temperatures, but it's almost impossible. And then to make it worse, in the summer, I need to wake up and really start working at 5 in the morning because you need to get your day done, or most of your day done, before 11 or noon at the absolute latest. And if you haven't slept, it's really hard to get out of bed at 5 a.m. And I'm just going to be blunt. I can't do that again another summer. That's not happening. This is the only time in my life, well, one of the few times in my life where I've actually used duct tape for ducting. I mean, obviously these things aren't completely designed to go together. They're not designed to go together at all. Hence duct tape. The other big lesson came from Nick, the mechanical engineer that I hired to design this. I had planned to build a 650 square foot cabin, which was going to require 4 stretches of 25-foot perforated, corrugated HDPE running straight that way. Said another way, each stretch of 25 feet that's running underground here would cool about 160 square feet. So knowing that my underground HDPE has significantly less square footage and the ceilings are more or less the same height, my system for a smaller size ought to overperform. There's also the problem of me not putting cement on top of the tubes, and I collapse them. That was just part of the way the team was designed, because you have Captain New Guy, who has the support of an architect and a mechanical engineer. The architect mentioned in passing that I would need to put a concrete cap over the HDPE. I don't know why. It didn't sink in until after the fact, but I didn't do that part. And nobody on the team had the responsibility of how to actually construct this. So as a new guy, I messed up. But I have these bags of leftover cement. Some of the bags have set. I kept it covered with a tarp, but somehow moisture managed to get through. Not all of the bags are good, but some of them are. This is just to prevent dust. Before I get on the dozer and I fill this thing in, one thought did occur to me, which is I have this giant hole and I have a nice supply of hydrogel. I'm not necessarily trying to get trees growing here, but you know, if I can get stuff to grow here, why not add it? So I've got these 4-inch pipes sticking out of the ground. One of them will be the intake, the other the outtake. Well, I suppose this is the big test. I've put almost all of the weight, and including the dozer driving over it, because it was just an enormous time saver. But now we got to actually test and make sure it works before we bother continuing. So I'm going to cut the pipes just a little bit and clean this up, and then let's make sure it works. This is a lot of work. So many of you have been following me since literally the first episode, and when people email me, that's usually one of the most common things they say is, Sean, I've watched you since the very first episode, and I know a lot of you, there's no way you're going to make it out to Dustups Ranch, and some of you live in Australia and the UK. It's just not going to happen, and it's really hard, and I know a lot of viewers have the same thought. How can I participate in Dustups if there's no way I'm ever going to be able to make it to Dustups? I've been working really hard on this because it's really important to me that everybody be able to participate no matter where they're located. And I got something I'm really excited to show you. I want to share those details with you, but this episode is not really the place. This is really only for the hardcore fans. So if you're watching Dustups with every single episode and you want to be really involved, I made a special video for you. Hit the card that you see on the screen, or you can click the link in the description and you'll be able to see the content that I made for my biggest supporters. I break all the details down in the video. Make sure you go check it out. And again, this is only for my biggest supporters. If you're a casual fan, the video's not for you. But if you watch every Dustups episode and you really want to see me succeed, you're going to enjoy this content. All right, I see dust blowing out. There we go. Thank God. Hallelujah. I have never been so happy to see dust in my life. Wow, that's pretty cool too. That feels cold. They need to go inside of the doghouse and not be outside where they're going to get blasted by the sun. How am I going to keep the sun off these pipes? And how am I going to feed as much clean air as possible? I'd love to tell you that I was so clever and I knew I was going to use these crates as the housing for the intake pipes and the fans, but sometimes you just get lucky. Daniel surfs Facebook Marketplace 24/7, and he found these crates on sale for $45 each. That's easily the value of all of this wood, let alone assembled. So I am thrilled to have it. We're going to have to make a little door and figure out how to manage it, but this is a really good housing. It's cheap, it's instant, and we were able to pick it up during one of Brandon's runs into El Paso, which is more often than I'd like, but we're there pretty frequently. So it's nice to pick up a big win. These crates led to a somewhat ridiculous scene where Brandon decided to treat himself to a night in a bougie hotel. And out front, we had my almost 20-year-old pickup with these things in the back of a trailer, and it looked a little out of place. I really got to change this blade. Let's see if I got a different one. So I just got to sawzall that line and then the other line, and hopefully the pipes will be able to fit through. These dog houses, which I'm inside of now, are only 87 square feet, and they have insulation in the walls. I believe it's at R13, which is comparable to the R10 value that the sandbag cabin would have had. The R stands for resistance, and the higher the R value, the better. It's a key factor for determining the energy efficiency of buildings. High R values keep the heat in the winter or keep the cool in the summer. So knowing that what I hired the engineer to do and what I'm now winging, I believe it's a fair comparison because the square footage and the cubic footage is pretty close. It's actually significantly smaller with what I'm trying to do. Okay, we're just gonna cut in that entire panel. Okay. One of the hardest parts of doing a project like this is figuring out what parts do I actually need when I'm not working off of a design spec. So I know if I leave my fans exposed to the brutal sun and the dust devil that just blew through here, then nothing's going to last very long. And of course, I'm going to be pushing dusty, nasty air through my tubes as well, and I don't need that. So I did what any good software engineer would do, and I used ChatGPT and Grok and other AI tools. How am I going to clean the air coming into my tubes? And it said you need a MERV filter, which I had never heard of and I knew nothing about, but it's a brave new world, and I can use AI to figure out things I don't know, like how do I filter air in the middle of the desert? So the AI tools taught me about MERV filters. And that led me to purchase this. Intake, outtake. Air flows across the filter. But how's the air going to go in? Well, AI to the rescue again. Obviously I need a fan, but how many cubic feet per minute, CFMs, do I need to run the system? And the reason I need the AI tools is I'm trying to find the right size fan because the electricity is so precious. Yes, I could buy a giant fan, push a ton of air through the 4-inch ducts, and yes, it would be cool, but it wouldn't accomplish my goal of minimizing electricity. So after feeding calculations and all the boring details, the result was I need a fan that pushes at least 150 CFM. I bought one that does 190. No, actually, I lied. I bought two, one for the intake, one for the outtake, because if there's one thing I don't want to do on camera, it's fail. So I thought, you know what? Okay, let's at least have a backup plan so that if one fan on the intake isn't good enough, we have two fans. That ought to be enough to win and not look foolish on YouTube in front of 100,000 people. Ta-da! Let's turn it on. The next project I'm going to do is hooking this building up and redoing the electrical room. So for now, just to simulate it, I'll run it with this power. Okay. I seriously wonder if I have that other fan upside down somehow, because I felt the wind coming out when I had the fan on, and that should be the opposite of what happens. Yeah, I feel it. Not very strongly, but I feel it. And I halfway apologize for this, guys, because it's not going to be much of a test. The weather is amazing because it's springtime in West Texas in the desert. But in the summer, it's going to be a much better time to follow up to see how effective it is. But right now, the incoming air, so it's pulling in 68-degree air, which is like, this test isn't going to mean anything. It's like our ideal temperature. Okay, so you can see shooting, pulling in 67, 68 degrees. And the air coming out, which I can feel, 63. Wow. So we got a 5-degree drop. That is way more than I expected. That's pretty cool. All right. Well, that feels good. Like, really good. Let's do that on the thermal camera, too. And this says 67.1. 67 is what this says. The units are slightly off for the laser thermometer. That says 63. Different measurements, but same outcome. It's pulling in air that's warmer and it's cooling it, which is what we want. I'm so happy. I'd love to tell you that I'm a genius and I designed it this way, but the space between the gaps for the air conditioners is 25 feet between this building and that building. And my tube needs to be 25 feet, which is going to be perfect because I can put an intake for that building here. And then of course the intake is at the other building. So one will house the other's intake, which will be a little goofy. I'll need to do the labeling, but what that's gonna let me do is run the mini excavator in a straight line. Check it out. I'm right by the intake for Brandon's cabin. So now imagine I'm on Diggy Smalls and I just start trenching and I get as deep as it can possibly get with a ripper tooth that I'm gonna buy now. And we just literally dig backwards, dumping the material this way the whole time until I get to 25 feet. So I can intake air in this housing in front of the tool shed, send it 25 feet underground, and then the outlet goes right up there. And then in the exact same trench, because the pipes can lay next to each other, we have an intake feed this way to go into the shed and provide nice cold air, and we only have to dig one trench to do it. So if I had known better, I would have dug trenches for both cabins once, but well, I'm not smart, but at least I can get less dumb. That on-site test we did was in near perfect weather conditions, and now that the weather's heating up after I left the ranch, I had Brandon do this quick test. And you can see that the air is entering the system at 90 degrees now that it's getting warmer, and it's leaving the system at 76, which shows that yes, even in uncomfortably warm conditions, it's acting as an air conditioner. Now the next step is to think about how we're going to get the most performance out of this system, and I'm not going to really get to test that for another month or so. I also need to finish tying in the HVAC room to the building so that we don't have outside air pouring in. And I have to make some decisions. The best way to get better performance out of the system will be to increase the wattage of the fans. I obviously don't want to do that. I really like the idea of having a 35-watt air conditioner that functions very well. But if that's not enough performance, then I'll have to change the fans. And then the second option is probably the more likely, where we recirculate the air. The standard for HVAC systems in the US, I'm told, is 20% of the air coming in needs to be fresh. I think we can try to recirculate 100% of the air because the building is not airtight. I think just from the way we operate, whether it's opening the door to walk in and out, or if somebody's in there, the air is going to be fresh. So I think it's totally fine for this particular application to try to recirculate all of the air. And that way, if it's coming in at first at 90 degrees and it leaves at 76, I don't think it's going to take very long to get the temperature all the way down to 70 degrees if we're dropping 15 degrees on the first pass. So we'll see how it performs. I unfortunately have to wait for the weather to cooperate. I'm very happy to wait for the weather to not cooperate, but when it does get hot in the desert, we'll be ready to deal with it as best we can. And then I'm going to take this learning experience from the kitchen and apply it like I showed you with connecting the shed and Brandon's cabin and then finally mine. So it's an evolving plan, but I'm really excited to have this project show some success this fast.